when President Trump was elected, with respect to tariffs as the cudgel, if you will, were fentanyl, which we've talked about. The other one was military spending.
Yep.
And obviously a hot topic here in Canada because there are segments of the Canadian population who believe we have not been pulling our weight internationally with respect to NATO, et cetera. I'm more interested in your thoughts with respect to hemispheric security and us not potentially not pulling our weight with military spending with NORAD. And you don't need to talk about the North. We talk about it a lot, but there's a lot of talk, and certainly the president made it clear he was unhappy with our lack of spending militarily. What are your thoughts on that subject, and how concerned should we be about that?
Well, I would venture to say that the president's probably unhappy with a lot of countries spending.
Of course, yeah.
So it's probably not just specific to Canada. I think overall, I would say that, and I think you've already seen this with Secretary Rubio, his first trip internationally was to Central America. I think overall, you're seeing a realignment a little bit, at least with the Trump administration, on a focus on the Western Hemisphere. More so, even more so than they did during the first term, which was more than previous administrations have done. If you're in the foreign policy establishment in the U.S. or the national security establishment and you want to talk about issues, you don't talk about anything in the Western Hemisphere.
Right.
You just don't. You talk about things in Europe and Asia, the Middle East, and it's also where the military, we send our military for the most part. And I think President Trump, again, from that America First approach is, okay, that's great, and we have allies and we have alliances, and he understands all that, and there's commitments there, got it, but what about our southern border? Right? And we talked about fentanyl. To my knowledge, there's no place in the world that kills between 70,000 and 100,000 Americans in a single year, but fentanyl does in the United States. And so when the president says, well, what are we doing about that? And there's very little military resources dedicated, very few intelligence resources dedicated to understanding how this is happening. He's not happy, right? And so you see a different...
We're pretty clear on that.
Yeah. He's not happy, and he's saying, I'm taking care of America first.
Yep.
Both Southern and Northern. And it's not, again, it's not a tagline, it's not a talking point. Like, it's real. And these are conversations that happen every day in the White House. About these issues. It's not sort of one thing and then they move on to the next. It's every day. How is the goal? Because whether you like him or not, he made certain commitments and he intends to stick to those commitments.
Right.
And so how are these commitments being honored by our partners? And then what's the progress to that? So I think, I think there will be, if you follow this stuff closely as I do, there is definitely more of a focus on the Western Hemisphere, which includes NORTHCOM, SOUTHCOM, and others for the United States across the board. When you talk about defense, and I think it's the Gold Dome, right? It's not the Iron Dome, but it's the Gold Dome, right? That he's talking about as well. So I think they've got a lot of different ideas that you're going to see rolled out that talks about security of North America, security of the U.S., but it's also going to impact folks in the hemisphere as well.
It's interesting you mentioned the tie-in to the tragic deaths that lead from fentanyl overdose. The Conservative Party actually has an ad out right now where they talk about overdose deaths and the magnitude of those in Canada compared to the losses we experienced as a nation in World War II.
Yeah.
When you start framing it like that, you start to truly understand the magnitude of the issue. And so we might not love exactly how it's playing out, but I think there are a lot of Canadians who certainly agree that there's a pretty significant problem.
Yeah, the analogy that we used to use was basically a 747 going down inside the United States every single day.
Wow.
And that's the number of U.S. citizens that we were losing in the United States every day. So it's a big issue.
Mind, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it focuses that a little bit. And I think that's why the president's really, really He's met with survivors. He's met with victims. I know he's met with several families that have lost, children, high school age children to this. I've got 2 high school age, senior and a junior, and a couple of years ago, and I still have these conversations. You have to have these very uncomfortable conversations of when they go out at night. Don't do anything stupid, right?
Yeah,
Don't put anything in your body that you like, because you don't know.
Yep.
And that much is lethal.
Yep. Well, we've now danced around it enough.